Hello everyone, welcome back to Architects Not Architecture and thank you for joining us. After an amazing response to the first virtual world tour, we decided to continue our global digital approach to connect the architectural community. With this event series, we are taking you on a tour around the globe to meet some of the most influential architects of our time and get to know them on a personal level. Today, as an opening event of the session 2, we will take you to Hong Kong, where we will have the great honor to talk to Moira Moser and William Lim. The next 4 stops will be Brazil, Japan, the United States, and Turkey. You probably don't want to miss the Japan edition, where we will have the Pritzker Prize laureate and world-renowned architect Toyo Ito as a speaker. You can visit our website to find more detailed information. There you can also watch the past virtual events on demand, but make sure you do it later. Let's focus and enjoy the next 1.5 hours together. As a first step, let me briefly introduce our format.
At Architects Not Architecture, we do not focus on architectural projects, but on the individuals who designed and built them. We often know the projects and awards of renowned architects, but what we often miss out on are the people behind them. It is them and their unique personal history which influence how they work and what they create. So we try to bring to the stage what too often remains unseen. Today, our speakers will talk about their career paths, their influences, and the experiences that shaped them and made them become who they are today. And the main rule is, they are not allowed to talk about their own projects.
Before the pandemic, we were doing in-person events in various European countries. Being able to reach people all over the world was something new for us, and we will make sure that all upcoming in-person events are broadcasted online. This fall, we are hosting our first in-person event after more than 1 year on October 28th, live at Object Campus in Stuttgart. However, that event will be held in German. Feel free to share any feedback about this event with us and send us your speaker suggestions. We are always happy to hear from you. This event is kindly supported by our partner, Moser. We would also like to mention the support of our media partners, Architaily, American Institute of Architects, Chapter Hong Kong, Cara Living, Future Arc, Design Anthology, as well as our broadcasting partner for China, Possession. Today we are welcoming our speakers, Moira Moser and William Lim, who will join us live from Hong Kong. Each of them will have 30 minutes on our virtual stage, 20 minutes to give a presentation, followed by a 10-minute interview. After the 2 talks, we will have a round of discussion where we will ask some of your questions, so make sure you get ready and use the designated box on our website to send in your questions. You will find it on the right side when scrolling down. That's the plan for today. Before we start, let me pass the mic to our partner, Moser.
Moser has designed, developed and produced ceramic tiles in Maastricht since 1883. We enable architects and designers around the world to create signature surfaces. Sustainability is our foremost priority. To achieve this, we adhere to the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, which helps us make a positive contribution to our society, our economy, and our planet. All of our products are made using the purest raw materials and have outstanding recycling potential. We save energy and water and create excellent social conditions. The key ingredients in our tiles are clay and sand, natural ingredients that do not harm the environment or public health. 1/3 of our energy needs is generated by renewable resources. We have closed process water cycles and purify the water used by our factories on site. Using the purest resources means our tiles can be reused or recycled. We are committed to creating a safe and pleasant environment for our employees, for nearby residents, and for people around the world who live and work in buildings featuring Moser tiles. We look at the whole, at the surface, the space, and the user. In this way, Moser is making a positive contribution to society, the economy, and the planet for current and future generations.
Our first speaker was born in Hong Kong. He graduated at Cornell University and has spent the last 2 decades at the forefront of architecture, culture, and art. In 1992, he founded CL3 Architects in Hong Kong, which offices in Shenzhen and Beijing as well today. CL3 Architects give Eastern aesthetics a modern interpretation resulting in a unique showcase of distinguished designs. Marina Bay Sands Singapore, Raffles City Chongqing, Kaesong 2 Bangkok, H Queens Hong Kong are some of these award-winning projects. He is committed to promoting culture and education. He is currently, for example, on the board of trustees for Cornell University, a member of the Arts and Culture Council for Asia Society Hong Kong Center, and a member of Museum Expert Advisors for the Leisure and Cultural Services Department. His work has been awarded Gold Key Award for Excellence in Hospitality Design, the China Design Award, and Chinese Designer of the Year 2017. We are extremely happy that he is participating today. Welcome, William Lim.
I'm William Lim from Hong Kong, and I thank very much Architect, Not Architecture, for inviting me to give this talk. And it's very interesting to put together this presentation about myself and not so much about my work, which I think is very refreshing, and it actually made me go back and really rethink about what my work is all about and how I got here. So actually, I mean, I will start by saying that, you know, I'm Chinese and I grew up in Hong Kong. And a lot of, when I look back, what really influenced me has to do with this Chinese concept of the yin and the yang, which in a way, a lot of people could see it as a negative thing about polarity and oppositions, but also the way we look at it in the Asian culture is we look at it as harmony. Two things that opposes or differs or are from different ends doesn't mean that they are two negatives, but they actually become a way of harmony. And maybe I can explain how this harmony has driven my work and the way that I think about my projects. So this is me back in I was born in 1957, but at the time we don't have photographs I couldn't see photograph of myself as a baby. So this is the youngest of me that I can find. I was born into a very big family. So on the right-hand side, you see a picture of my parents. And I was actually born at a time where I have two mothers. So I was born into a family, big family, Hong Kong, Malaysia. And in a way, maybe this is also a way that I can talk about this duality and harmony as a way of kind of propelling the way I grew up. So this is my parents in around the time that I was born, and then on the right you could see how our family have grown like from over the years, and it was actually don't underestimate Chinese because we can multiply very fast. And this is actually before I had 4 grandchildren. So this was, we have actually grown more since that time. So actually I grew up at a time when Asia was going through tremendous change. It was really like, by the time you could say Hong Kong is a very international city now, but at the time when I was growing up in the 60s, Hong Kong was actually has a lot of Chinese influence. On the left, we see the Tiger Balm Garden, which is a place that parents would take their kids to. It was kind of this traditional Chinese garden, but what it has was all these scary things about hell. So it actually tells you a lot of things about what not to do, because otherwise you will end up, being kind of tortured in hell. So this was kind of the mindset of the Chinese growing up. But then, of course, we also is facing a world that is looking at Asia, and there was tremendous opportunity. So on the right-hand side is the hotel that my father constructed, and this was his baby when I was just starting to realize I knew he was in hotel, and this is the hotel that he built with the support of the whole family, and everyone was trying to make this work and unify the family. And this is also how I got influenced by my father to become an architect, because he dealt with a lot of architects in his career, and he actually encouraged me to be an architect. Growing up in Hong Kong, of course, we grew up in the colonial Hong Kong. There were a lot of British presence and British rules. And there were also, a lot of turmoil, I think, over this whole period of time. And so I think there's always a kind of conflict going on. But I think like when I talk about the yin and the yang, and conflict maybe is also a way for us to understand and for us to move forward. So like in the 1970s, on the right-hand side, Hong Kong was constructing the most, it was at the time the tallest concrete structure, I think, in the world. It was like a kind of I think it's a 60-story building, all made out of cast-in-place concrete. But then on the right-hand side, you could see the kind of the more rundown part of Hong Kong. This is Kowloon Walled City, which is kind of a notorious place where a lot of crime, a lot of, you go in and it's kind of like a maze. It was torn down, I think, in the 1980s, but at the time, it was actually a few blocks away from my high school in Hong Kong. And to tell you the truth, this is the kind of environment that for a kid growing up, this was a lot more exciting than the one on the right-hand side. So we would go in and explore, and we would go to the fringe of this Kowloon Walled City. We don't dare to go inside, but the kind of activity and the vibrancy is, actually very exciting for young kids like myself. So around the same time is also, I think I was in around maybe Form 3, Form 4 in the British education system. It's a kind of time that we also get a lot of influence from America. I think the American culture was very exciting. I mean, in the 70s, it was, like we have the feminine side. I remember Liza Minnelli and the movie Cabaret, and the idea of what's good is sitting all alone in your room. I think it's the kind of thing that actually has stayed with me even now. It's like when I have time, I want to go out and do something. And of course, around the same time, my biggest hero growing up was Bruce Lee, and it was, of course, a lot of young people my age at the time adore him. But then he died all of a sudden, and it was the kind of moment that you feel that things don't really last forever, and it was kind of an awakening moment for young people like myself. So in 75, I went to the US for the first time. I went to a prep school in Connecticut. And here you see also the Jaws was shown at the cinema at the time. It just came out, and I remember my sister taking me and just dropping me off at the cinema because she was too scared to go in and watch the movie. And then I watched this, Jaws, and then I went to Connecticut and stayed in this, small, quiet village. So it's a lot of kind of dichotomy and oppositions and things like that happening. And then I entered Cornell in 76. And to me, it was a real life-changing experience. I'm still with Cornell. I still, before the pandemic, I have to go 4 times a year because I'm on the board of trustees. And in the lower left-hand corner, you see President Martha Pollack. And that was in one of those, the last trip that I went before COVID. And we were, so Cornell has always been a very important part of my life. And also at the time, I was entered architecture, and I was, from somebody that has not been no knowledge of architecture, and everyone at the time was talking about Richard Meyer and the white architecture and the five architects from New York. And it was a very vibrant time, and a very, in a way, Cornell is really where a lot of the thinking started to happen. Here you see my friend on the right. These are my friends even now. So I developed friends that were, really stayed with me throughout the time. And then, of course, at the time was Saturday Night Fever. So I can tell you I'm not really that good a student. I did my work well, but then we had a lot of time dancing, actually, most of the time. But my inspiration came from this professor, Chuck Pierman, who passed away a few years ago. But he was the one that really opened up my mind. He introduced me to Frank Lloyd Wright. He is a fanatic of Frank Lloyd Wright and Japanese architecture. And at the time, I was very surprised to find out that actually American architects, Western architects have actually been also influenced by Asian architecture. So it was a real eye-opening time for me. And around actually that year, 78, I went to Berlin, and I studied under Matthias Unger. So you can see the difference between, being taught Frank Lloyd Wright at one moment, and then Matthias, which I think is also like his thinking of the rationalist architecture has been a very crucial part of the way I think even up till now. And at the time, you might remember, for those of you that are similar to my age, 2 very important books that came out. One is Rand Koolhaas's Delirious New York, and talking about urbanism and the way high-rise and the density of a city and the way a city developed. Whereas on the other hand, there is Roma Interata, which is this exhibition in Rome, and spearheaded by some of the thinkers that were also very important at Cornell: Colin Rowe, Mike Dennis, Michael Grave and Richard Meyer, Rob Creer. So all these thinking about, in a way, a dual, one side we're talking about modernism and this development of the city. On the other side, we're experiencing from the repercussion of these major urban renewal, like Boston city, where a lot of the whole entire historic part got wiped out and rebuilt. And then we have the other thinking, the Roma Interata group, which really start to think that it's important that we live with history and incorporate that into our urban texture. At the same time, I'm also like, I was, other than architecture, there are a lot of other stimulation coming in. At the time, Dwayne Michael, I did a lot of photography. It was my at university, but photographers like Dwayne Michaels who kind of start to tell stories with photographs, and then the music and the opera of Philip Glass, Einstein on the Beach. It's just amazing the way that you can deal with architecture and space with the opera, and it was the stage set and everything was just amazing to experience. So after I graduated, I went to Boston, and I was working and of course starting a family. So we had 5 very nice years in Boston. I worked actually at the time I worked for Earl Flansburgh. I was doing drawings like this actually as a side job also to, bring in a bit more income. So this drawing is for Boston by Foot, which is operated by Earl's wife. And she asked me to do a drawing of this project that I worked on when I was with Earl. And then in '87, we came back to Hong Kong. Again, Hong Kong back then was very vibrant, very active, but not an international city like now. We still see a lot of very local presence. On the left-hand side, you see this tram actually driving through a wet market. And it's just one of those most stunning and exciting things about this Hong Kong local culture. And then on the right, it was my first trip to China was to Guilin. So you can see at the time, China was still just starting to develop, and you can see that duality between Hong Kong and China. Of course, now it's almost flipped the other way. So in 1992, the premier of China, Deng Xiaoping, actually came to the southern part of China, very near Hong Kong, and he came up, with the commitment to develop the southern part of China. This is how you see Shenzhen going from a farmland to what it is now, 30 years later. And then at the time was also like the time when the British was talking about, giving Hong Kong back to China and the handover in 1997. So a lot of major events happened during that time to actually, and that was the time when I was also considering to set up my own practice. So in 1993, I was not the one to set up CL3. I was actually invited by some other people who I actually hardly knew, but somehow they were looking for one more architect to help them set up this firm. So I joined them, and it was great opportunity, starting up your practice. And at the time, China was really moving very fast, and almost we get a new project almost every week. And it was an amazing time. But of course, with that comes responsibility. You have your staff, you have to grow an office, you have to, it's very different. At first I thought when you start an office, you can control your own time, you can do your own thing. But that's not true at all. It was like you have no time of your own. Every minute you have, you're thinking about the office. Of course, we went through really awful time also. It's up and down during this time. Of course, everyone remember 2001, the 9/11. It changed the world forever. Also at the time, we also was, we were work-wise, we were lucky enough that there was a lot of construction still going on in China, but, we all got, affected by 9/11, what happened to the world economy. And then after that, it was SARS. And then after that, it was the Asian financial crisis. So the whole career is really like up and down. And I think you really have to endure it to be able to survive. So my work, from the very beginning, a lot of what I think about has to do with the local domestic elements, the vernacular of Hong Kong, the things we see here, the scaffolding, all these very local things. But then I try a few times also to, whenever I have an opportunity, I would try to show this side of Hong Kong overseas. So I was actually in Venice biannual 2 times in the Hong Kong Pavilion, and both times I want to bring Hong Kong's culture to Italy, and I brought like scaffolding craftsmen and helped me build these temporary structure in Venice, and even up to now, I consider my projects with temporary installation, temporary structure as very important. As the way that I think about the concept of my work. I think what we are hoping to do moving forward from this time is a lot of greening and sustainable project. It becomes something that we started to think about maybe 10 years ago. And then now it's becoming more and more important in my practice. So I think in a way, this will be something that we will be very keen to continue doing. And for every project that we do, I try to really convince my client that, let's do it more green, let's use sustainable material. And more so in Asia, people are listening. Actually, some projects are very proud. The client are very proud to have their projects being LEED or WELL certificate, and a lot of concept about health and green. Other than just doing architecture, I also is very involved with the Hong Kong art scene. My wife and I have been collecting artwork, and in 2014, we actually published a book called The No Colors. It featured about 200 works by 50 Hong Kong architects. It's a way to bring Hong Kong artists to a more world-recognized platform. And then this year, we actually donated part of that collection to AnA. So I think that, to me, it's one of those things that you collect, and then somehow you would be able to share it with more people by donating your work to other people. And I think now with COVID, my life, actually Hong Kong is getting better with COVID in the last few months, but that was a time when we were just allowed to, we cannot go to any restaurants, we have nothing much to do. There was a time we can't even go swimming, but that was, when I could go swimming, that was between swimming and painting were the things that I was doing during the time of COVID. And then right now, I start to also, because with COVID, there's a lot of time for us to reflect, to think about what brought us here, to think about. So actually right now, we just moved into a new office, and I'm in the process of writing a book about my work, and it will be published by an Italian publisher. It would hopefully be ready actually, we were rushing to get it printed by December. So hopefully by next year, you would be able to see a book on my work. As a Chinese family, we always believe in our root and where we came from, and also to wish for the best for our future. So right now I have 4 grandchildren, my 2 sons and their wives. They are all architects. Fortunately, they are all living in Hong Kong. So during this COVID period, we have an opportunity to at least see each other and spend time with my 4 grandchildren. And I think this is what I would like to share with you. I hope this gives you a better idea of who I am and how my work has evolved over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William, for the wonderful presentation. Thank you a lot. It was a very nice talk. Did really enjoy the so many dualities. And of course, I wonder how was it to live in Hong Kong at that time. You show those pictures of the walled city and then the new buildings, and you said as a kid it was even more exciting to be in that kind of environment.
Yes.
How was that time for you, and what do you remember of Hong Kong those days?
It was a very good time, actually. I mean, of course, well, as kids, we were not so bothered by a lot of, political thing that was going on. Also, that was pre-architecture time. So it was really just having, a good time going to school. I think the school system in Hong Kong is very difficult. It's very demanding. I felt that somehow I have a way to do my exams and studies and still be able to have fun with my friends. And so actually that was a good time. And I have to say that I said that the kind of more grassroots type of environment, the more local type of building interests me more than like the super high rise. And I would say that it's not even back then, but even now, to me, I think I'm a lot more interested in the grassroots elements, in the vernacular element, in the way that people live in the city, the real life that people live. It's not, I kind of am not too impressed by the super high rises that look the same in everywhere. But I think the local element, the little neighborhoods is really still what still draws me nowadays.
There is, as you are so related to art and painting, I wonder what is your definition of architecture as art, if it's an art, and what you will say of when is architecture art for you?
I think we have to look at, I think maybe you could say when, I think architecture is definitely art, but I think maybe the differentiation is when is a building and when does it become architecture? The big division should be. So I think.
How do you do this division?
Well, I think buildings only are functional and it has no spirit, whereas architecture has a spirit, has a thinking behind it. And I think kind of looking through all this, you know, the education I have, all these different diversity in terms of architecture that people were doing. I think to do architecture, you have to break away from the normal thinking. You have to have something extra that people is beyond just being conventional and beyond being just functional. I think engineers can do buildings that are buildings, but I think architects, we are supposed to do architecture. And if you do architecture, I think they will become works of art. I mean, I think the difference between art and sculpture and architecture is just that architecture might have a function behind it, but you can definitely call a lot of architecture art. And now in a lot of museums, they are collecting architectural models, they're collecting design. So I think definitely I look at architecture as a form of art.
Or even installations, as you say that your installations were so relevant for you as an architect. That's something many museums are collecting as well.
Yes, collecting maquettes of installations. Yes.
On art and architecture, I wonder what does because in a previous conversation you mentioned that you went back to painting a bit more since COVID, and yes. I wonder how do architecture and painting fulfill you in a different way?
Right. So I loved to paint when I was a kid, but then when going to architecture school, I kind of didn't have time to do any things. I took up photography instead, and then throughout my career up to the time of COVID, I really don't have a moment to paint. And when I used to paint, I used to just do it very quickly, and I just it was a way to let out my energy. But now when I paint, I actually start to observe. I start to look at the little parts of an object. And in a way, sometimes I thought about it. I thought that thing is round, but when I actually look at it, it's not round. When I start to paint it, I start to look at it, and it's different than what I thought it. And that actually is something that I'm also starting to look at in my design. That certain things, you think that you're communicating this and you're trying to design this, but in a way, maybe it's only in your mind, but in a way, when you deliver it, it's something totally different. Or to the eye of somebody else, it could be very different. So in a way, I think to be able to scrutinize my work more during this time, and in a way that using the idea of studying painting to look at my design, it actually helped me to rethink about the way I design.
That's so nice to hear that even this painting passion makes you even more sensitive as an architect.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
There is one question from the audience. I encourage everyone to use the box on our website to send in the questions. Someone asked, during the transition from British to Chinese government, what changed, if anything, in your architecture or designs?
Actually, we were doing a lot of work in China during this time, in Greater China. And I think maybe in terms of physical thinking, I would like to think that it's the same. But then actually in terms of the quality of the work that are coming out and the kind of thinking of the developers and all that, I see a real change over the last 10, 15 years. Before, I think architecture used to be a lot more safe, a lot more. It's like if it has to be. If you want me to build it, if you want to convince the client, they want to know that where it has been built before. But I think nowadays there is a more appreciation of architecture and design as something very unique, and it's almost something that could help promote the project. We could help them lease the project or sell the project by having great design and unique design. So over the last 10, 15 years, a lot of our clients are starting to look more into something that is innovative, something that is different. We need to bring in new elements. So I think it's a lot more daring to me, the transition.
That's a good transition.
I think so.
William, I would like to thank you for the talk and for the interview. If it's okay for you, we'll meet in about half an hour during the roundtable discussion, and then we will introduce now Moira. So thank you, William, for the presentation. Thank you a lot. Before we start with our second speaker, I want you to do something which will keep you updated and support us at the same time, which is great. I want you to pick up your phone, okay? Open Instagram and search for architects, not architecture, or simply scan this code, okay? Architects, not architecture, no, it's long, architecture. Found it? Great. Now press follow. Are you based in China or you just don't use Instagram? You can visit our website or scan this code to sign up for our newsletter. Now you won't miss any upcoming events. Thank you for supporting us. Our second speaker was born in California. She received international education and gained experience in California, Germany, Turkey, and Iran before establishing AnA Moser Associates in Hong Kong in 1981. She's a recognized architect in California, the UK, and Hong Kong, and is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. In 2001, she became one of the few women to be made a fellow of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects. Today, AnA Moser Associates is a global firm with over 1,100 employees in 25 locations in the world and provides a holistic approach to physical and digital workplace environments of all scales. In 2004, she was recognized as Hong Kong's Entrepreneur of the Year by the Women of Influence Group. In 2008, received the prestigious Legend Award at the Contract Annual Design Award in New York. In 2019, AnA Moser Associates was awarded Firm of the Year by the American Institute of Architects International Region. An outstanding career, if I may say. We are extremely proud of having her with us today. Welcome, Moira Moser.
Thank you, Furman. And hello, everyone. It's quite strange to be asked to talk about myself and not about our work. But perhaps the story of my becoming an architect will encourage others to explore their own path. I grew up in Laguna Beach, a small town of fewer than 10,000 people on the Southern California coast. Laguna was not just a beach town. It was a well-established artist colony. Frank Kuprian, the dean of Laguna artists, was a close friend of my family. Laguna was already famous for its annual art festival, both for exhibits from local artists and even more for the Pageant of the Masters, masterpieces done on stage with real people. As a child, my first lesson in art history were from these living pictures, well-known ones by Millet, Renoir, sculptures like the Greek Discobolus, and always ending each night with Da Vinci's Last Supper. In this creative community, my father, an entrepreneur who had emigrated from Switzerland as a young man, and my mother, a stay-at-home mom with a theater background, who was always at the piano, made sure we were always surrounded by innovative and creative people. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I loved to read my mother's Better Homes and Gardens magazines, looking at all the beautiful houses with happy people and the plans that went with them. I wanted to create places like that where people would have happy lives, like the one I had. And that's when I decided to become an architect. I had no idea then, of course, that the human experience of the architectural space would continue to be a driving force for me. Laguna had just one high school, and girls were not allowed to take shop class or mechanical drawing. But I was lucky that a neighbor living across the street, Mr. Laralde, was a retired architect. He gave me a drafting board, a T-square, and triangles, and taught me the basics of architectural drafting. He was my first mentor. Actually, the typing class I had to take in high school turned out to be okay too, as it got me a summer job when I graduated, secretary to a small 2-person architectural firm, my first taste of working for an architect. Graduating from high school, I was accepted at the USC School of Architecture, but the curriculum they offered then was very engineering focused, nothing at all about people, and that didn't seem right to me. So I went to Scripps College in Claremont instead, a beautiful campus, as you can see. The Scripps Humanities core course wove architecture into sociology, religion, and all aspects of the development of societies. This gave me a truly humanitarian and humanistic basis for studying architecture. But I wanted to see actually some of what I was studying. So I left before graduating and went to Hamburg, Germany. Having learned German at Scripps, I was able to study architecture at Hamburg University, attending lectures under that central dome that you see in the picture there. But I had to earn my way through school. So I got a job waiting table at a small cafe next to the construction site for the new subway in Hamburg. The workers and the contractors would come for a meal and a beer, and when they found I was studying architecture, they helped me get a job as a draftsman at the reinforced concrete construction firm that was building the subway. The firm was in Chile House, one of Hamburg's iconic old buildings. The building still had the Paternoster elevator system with the open cabs continually going up, around, and down like a rosary. I had never seen that before, but soon learned to quickly jump in and out of the moving cabs. Working my way through school in Germany turned out to be just too difficult, and I knew I had to get back to the US to finish my architectural education. But being in Europe, I decided to take the grand tour first, albeit as a poor student staying in youth hostels. My first stop was Cologne, or Köln in German, to see the cathedral. Having just left a reinforced concrete construction firm, I thought to myself, how in the world did they do this without reinforced concrete? But more than that, it was the awesome experience of the interior space and of the light that was so overwhelming. Hosteling on, I went to Ronchamp, and again, even more than the building's amazing presence in the landscape, it was the spatial experience of the interior created by the light that stuck with me. Hosteling on further, I had an unexpected chance to go to Istanbul, so that's where I went. It was so fascinating to be in a culture that I knew nothing about and that was not really Western. So I went to the Istanbul Technical University and asked if I could study architecture there. They were very surprised, of course, but they said yes. David Gebhard, the architectural historian, was there on a Fulbright exchange program. He and I were the only Westerners at the university then. There was a lot of hands-on learning, running around the hills with a theodolite to do surveys, learning strength of materials by crushing concrete and stretching steel, doing measured drawings of classic mosques to serve as illustrations in a professor's coming book, detailing from scratch wooden double-hung windows. But still, I knew I would have to get back to the US to finish my architectural education and become an architect. So together with an Iranian architectural student in my class, Nader Khalili, whom I married, we headed to Rotterdam, taking the Orient Express third class. We were still poor students, as far as Paris. We made a stop in Paris just long enough to visit the Sacré-Cœur and the Louvre. There I am with the Venus de Milo. No barriers around artworks in those days. Then it was on to Rotterdam, where we took the Grootebier, a troop ship turned student ship, to New York. Coming back to the US by the Statue of Liberty, I felt a bit like an immigrant, but happy to be coming home. But New York wasn't home, California was. So on to California, where I registered at UC Berkeley's School of Architecture. Our studio classes were in a wonderful old shingled building that we called the Arc. Don Lynn Linden, later of MLTW, was teaching there, as was Patrick Quinn, who later went on to be Dean of the School of Architecture at Rensselaer in New York. I don't have a photo of Patrick from the old days, but we're still in touch today. After Berkeley, and I didn't want to stay there because I didn't want to become a Bay Area architect, I went down to Los Angeles, closer to my hometown of Laguna Beach, to look for a job. It wasn't easy. Not only was I fresh out of school, I was a woman, and most firms wouldn't hire a woman as she might be a distraction in the drafting room. But then I interviewed for a job with Mr. Rook, who had a small firm designing schools. It turned out he was from Hamburg and had actually been involved in the design of the central domed portion of Hamburg University, where I had studied. And I could still speak German, so I got the job. He was a good mentor and very supportive. With enough apprenticeship, I was able to sit for and pass the exams for the California architectural license. Eventually, I got a job at the California office of Edward Durrell Stone and worked my way up to being the project architect for an early Kaufman and Broad office building, working with the consultants through design and engineering, then working with the contractor through construction, basically doing the entire project. But Nader, my Iranian architect husband, wanted to go back to Iran, where things were progressing quite rapidly in those days. So it was goodbye USA and hello Iran. What an amazing amalgam of mud brick villages, elegantly tiled mosques and madrasas, and women in their black chadors. Living in Tehran in the 1970s, things were developing rapidly. I registered with the trade office of the US Embassy just in case anyone would want to meet with a US architect. Nader and I had a small architectural practice, and there were a few commissions. My dear son, Dastan Khalili, who is now a filmmaker in California, was born. But the greater excitement was that it seemed the whole world wanted to come to Iran in those days. In 1974, I was involved in Iran's International Congress of Architects at Persepolis. It was opened by Empress Farah, who had studied architecture in Paris before marrying the Shah. It was a marvelous assembly of outstanding architects, including those shown here, plus many others. And I think Ungers was there too, William. Iran was moving ahead so rapidly that everyone in the world seemed to want to get involved, including the world's best architects. And Iran's own young architects who had studied abroad were rediscovering their architectural roots and creating new interpretations. It was an exciting time. Also in 1974, Louis Kahn came to Tehran at the Shah's behest to create a proposal for the development of Abbasabad, a huge empty space in the middle of Tehran that I was very familiar with. As I was the only US architect resident in Tehran, I had the opportunity with a few colleagues of not only meeting with Lou Kahn, but also of hosting him for a private dinner. For me, as a young aspiring architect, that was even more exciting than meeting the Empress Farah. Not to be outdone by the men, in 1976, the Empress Farah sponsored and opened the International Conference of Women Architects in Ramsar at the Caspian Sea. I was very involved in organizing that, together with a few other Iranian women architects. Although we were a smaller group, we were every bit as passionate about creating architecture that would contribute to the quality of people's lives. And yes, we did have a proper conference hall for the sessions. We weren't always sitting on the floor. Denise Scott Brown came, as did Ann Ting, Gay Aulenti, Alison Smithson, Anna Bofiel, and others. Ann Ting particularly remained a close friend for many years after that. While in Tehran, I joined the US-based Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat and participated in several of their global conferences. In 1977 and 78, they invited me to their headquarters in Lehigh, Pennsylvania, as a visiting research scholar, where I focused on planning and environmental criteria for tall buildings. They also gave me the opportunity to go to Hong Kong to study how tall buildings were being developed there. In doing that research and talking with the city's leading architectural firms, I heard the message several times, there's a lot happening here, and if you come back, we have a job for you at our firm. When I returned to Tehran, the Iranian Revolution was just getting underway, and what I had heard in Hong Kong stuck in my mind. And then in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini took over the government of Iran. As an American, I was no longer welcome. As a woman architect, it was not possible for me to continue working. My personal life wasn't in great shape either, so it was time for me to leave. As I left Iran, Hong Kong beckoned. And when I arrived in Hong Kong, it looked like this. That tall building on the waterfront was the tallest building in the Central District on Hong Kong Island. And William remembers this too. At the time I arrived, though, China's 1978 open door policy was already opening the country to foreign businesses, and Hong Kong as an entry point was a boom town. Rapid change was in the air. I quickly found a position with one of the city's major architectural firms that I had interviewed for the Tall Building Council the previous year. The firm I joined was responsible for designing one of the largest residential developments being built then, Taikoo Shing. At the same time, many US and European companies were setting up in Hong Kong so they could push their business ahead in China. It was obvious that Hong Kong was changing rapidly into an international city. My entrepreneurial instinct saw opportunities. So in 1981, I went out on my own, starting a small firm with just 3 people. Even as we grew, it was still primitive then. No computers, everything was still drawn by hand. But as Hong Kong was still a British colony, my US architectural license wasn't recognized. So I went to London to be interviewed for licensure there, which I got. Then with a UK architectural license, I was able to be interviewed for a license in Hong Kong. I was successful with that too, and became, in Hong Kong terminology, an authorized person. That means I am authorized to be a person. In 1983, I won a competition jointly with William Turnbull for the American Country Club, with me as the architect of record. One of Bill's former senior colleagues, Carl Smith, had come to Hong Kong and joined our firm, and that's how we had all gotten together for the competition. I won't show you the project, of course, but that roll of drawings that Bill is holding as we stand on the site tells you the story of how we did the project. With Bill in San Francisco and us in Hong Kong and no computers, we sent rolls of drawings back and forth every weekend across the Pacific by courier. It was a great experience, but today it's amazing to think that we actually got things done that way. With so much happening in Hong Kong in the 80s and 90s, a group of native Hong Kongers, plus a few of us Americans, all of whom had studied in the US, had become licensed then, were members of the AIA, banded together to establish the AIA's first offshore chapter in 1997. Since then, the AIA International region has grown globally and grown rapidly. So I think we started a good thing. We've all found opportunities to contribute not only to Hong Kong's urban and architectural environment, but to that in mainland China and other parts of the region as well. Hong Kong today is a visually sophisticated urban environment of many tall buildings. That white building behind the Ferris wheel, the tallest when I arrived in 1979, doesn't look so tall anymore. I was traveling a lot to our 25 global offices before the COVID pandemic put a stop to that. But Hong Kong is home. And I am married to Joseph Look, a native Hong Konger who is now quite involved in the business and organizational aspects of our global growth. In the 40 years of our firm, my passion for creative workplace environments that support positive experience has not dimmed. I've emphasized our focus on sustainability and wellness, creating healthy building environments, and now also designing toward net zero carbon. I and the whole firm passionately champion a return to the architect's responsible integration and leadership of all of a project's disciplines in both design and construction. We embrace and design for the rapid changes we are witnessing in the way knowledge workers work And that's enabled by technology for them. And we also are using the tools that technology gives us to create better built environments at all scales. Most importantly, I find it a real joy to bring young talent into the firm, helping them grow and develop. Daniel Burnham said it well. Remember that our sons and grandsons are going to do things that would stagger us. I've found that what he said is just as true for women in the profession as it is for men. So that's my story, and thank you for listening.
Thank you a lot, Moira, for the presentation. It was so nice. Also, a very nice quote at the end, like think big. You are a truly adventurer. How old were you when you decided to left the university in California and go to Europe?
I was just 19.
19. And how was the trip to Europe? Was by train or
by, no? Well, I had to fly across the ocean.
Yeah.
No, I flew okay. to London first and then to Hamburg.
And you said you were traveling around Europe in third class. I don't know that. How was third class?
Well, actually, no. It was traveling back from Istanbul on third class in the Orient Express, the famous Orient Express. First class, second class, third class. Third class has hard wooden benches facing each other in a cabin with about 6 people all together, and you bring your own food.
Must be very interesting to be there.
Yeah.
I have to tell you something. The first time I took a flight was when I was 22. From 22. Okay. I cannot compare that with your trips.
Well, my first flight at 19, that was my first flight too.
No, 19, yeah, but across Europe and by yourself, that's must be crazy.
In Europe, I was hosteling, I was hitchhiking.
Yeah, also a great idea, right?
It was safe in those days. It was safe in those days.
You must have amazing memories. It's also interesting that you now are based in Hong Kong and you stayed in Hong Kong, and you consider Hong Kong as your hometown or your city.
After more than 40 years here, my goodness, this is home. But I do travel a lot when the pandemic allows me to.
I also had to think about the first amazing building you saw with this Cologne dome. Probably was the first inspiring workplace that you have seen, as you are working so much with workplaces. That was somehow also a workplace. Well,
what I find is that every place you sit down and think and do something is a workplace. We used to call these things offices. Now we call them workplaces. And sometimes they're work points, work locations, whatever. But wherever you can sit and think and do something, you make that your workplace. And maybe it's under a tree in a garden.
As long as you have Wi-Fi right now, you can work. You can work from there.
Right.
In an interview, I found out that at the age of 9, you already knew that you wanted to be an architect. That's true?
Right. Yes.
What would you recommend to people that didn't have that kind of revelation? Sometimes it's not that easy, right?
Well, I think whenever you fall in love with the profession, that's when you want to do it. But you have to really love it, because it's not easy to become an architect, as you well know.
Yeah, William, I actually also mentioned that he thought maybe at the beginnings of the practice you have time for yourself and so on. Right?
No. Actually, the truth is that clients determine how much time you have.
So we have to find good clients.
Usually they want everything done yesterday. So
That's
you
hard.
stay up to the late hours and finish to get things finished.
I see one question from the audience regarding being a female architect. Do you mind if I ask something
Please,
about
go ahead.
that? Do you think that being a woman in a male-dominated profession early in your career had an influence or your desire to start your own company or firm? And what would you regard as your greatest success in your life, not just in architecture?
Well, the first question, those are two questions, very different.
Yeah, that's right.
No, actually, I was very fortunate. My parents never discouraged me from being an architect. They never told me that it was a man's profession. And so I very blindly went ahead and said, well, I'm just going to become an architect. Mm-hmm. And actually, I am going to be very, very happy when one day people don't talk about women architects. Mm. We don't talk about man architects. Are you a man architect?
I'm a licensed architect, as you say. Licensed person.
We're all architects, okay? Gender has nothing to do with it, really. Mm. The other question, tell me again, what was the other question?
What will you regard as your greatest success in your life? Not just architecture, that must be hard.
My greatest success is my son. Mm-hmm. I am so proud of him. He's an independent filmmaker. He has a film that is going to be streamed in early next year, a feature film that is actually in about 12 hours from now in Los Angeles. It will be showing as a short premiere. And I'm very, very proud of him because he too has followed his passion. Mm-hmm. I followed my passion. He's followed his passion. And I think that's what makes a good professional or a good artist or a good architect.
Mm, that's true. Do you have any regrets?
Oh my goodness. No, not about becoming an architect, certainly. Mm. No, I'm very glad I've done this, and I still love it. It's fascinating.
Mm. Actually, AnA Moser Associates is now one of the top 20 biggest companies in the world.
I don't count
as a design company.
I don't count these things. Numbers don't mean anything to me, actually. Those kinds of numbers don't mean it. Hmm?
What does success mean to you?
What is success? Success is when our clients come back to us, when our clients recommend us to other people, when our clients say that we have given them something that is beyond what they were hoping for. That's success.
Mm-hmm. That's a nice answer. I will say, if you're okay with that, I will ask William to join our roundtable discussion. It's okay?
Great.
All right. So now we can hear William as well.
Okay.
That's great. It's such an honor. It's such an honor to have you both participating.
I think we come from two different backgrounds. We have two different approaches, and I think we both respect one another. I certainly respect you, William. I know you do some really great stuff.
Thank you. And, we pretty much live, in the same city. We see each other once a while, but I never knew this amazing story about you and what you have done. It's just amazing.
I didn't know your story either. Hey, I wanted to pick up on one thing you talked about, your family background, having two mothers. It's really interesting because I when I was living in Iran and married to an Iranian, I lived in a family, that kind of an extended family. So I know the experience that you grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting. I mean, I always think that I have the best family, and if I were to choose again, I would choose the same family. And it's just, and with two mothers, with two wives, but you know, all my siblings, we get along so well. We still talk to each other like all the time, and they come visit and all that. So it was a very interesting thing. And of course, I could see that even with a husband and wife, you would have argument. But with the three of them, it was amazing that they lived all these years. My mother lived to be 94. My father lived to be 104.
Oh, wonderful!
Wow.
So you have a long ways to go.
There is a first thing. Actually, you have started already, but there is something we like to ask. It's if you have a question unrelated to projects that you would like to ask each other.
Well, I think we've already been talking a lot about, we're discovering one another's backgrounds. As you said, William, we see each other occasionally, but gosh, I didn't know about your background. You didn't know about mine. So it's kind of fun.
Yes. So first.
I see one of the I encourage the audience to send questions. I see one of them. Maybe I will start with one of my questions, and will be regarding Moira. You mentioned the beginnings with the AIA. What does this kind of association, the AIA is the American Institute of Architects, help you as an architect, especially in your beginnings?
Oh yeah, well when I went to Iran, it was a badge of honor. It really said, oh, the AIA means that you do things honestly. There's no backhanded work. You actually get things done professionally. So it was very important to have that credential.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same thing happened initially when I came to Hong Kong. I found that people said, oh, wow, AIA, that's really a globally known brand, if you will, for architects. It means that they really know what they're doing. So it's always been a badge of honor for me.
And William, how was that helpful for you? If it was, maybe.
It's definitely helpful. I mean, I think I was probably among the early members, or maybe a founding member. I can't remember. Yeah. But it definitely it's very helpful, especially like doing work in China. I think China, they really look up to the US in spite of what you think is going on. But you're having a US education, having that credential is very useful doing work in China.
Yeah. And now that you are both so well established and everything is working well, you have so many projects, so many awards won at the office. What are the biggest challenges that you are having nowadays?
The best challenges are the new projects that are coming down the line, because we're going for our work, which is primarily creating workplace environments, whether they're inside a building or an entire building or an entire campus. The way work is being done is changing so rapidly because of technology and because of artificial intelligence. And so the environments that we create for people for working are going to have to change as well. The buildings will have to change, the campuses will have to change. So those are the exciting challenges that I see in front of us.
William, what about you?
Well, for me, I think it's an ongoing challenge. It's always been creating a certain balance between what I would like to do and what I need to feed the office. That's always been a challenge, and you know, in a way, we actually at the beginning of this year, we tried to scale down the office. I think that some of the work we do can be more exciting or interesting, but then because we need to run the office, we need a certain amount of work. So we try to scale down, but then gradually in the last couple of months, 3 months or so, we actually came back up. So in a way, to me, it's like I would like ideally to strike a balance between the kind of work we need and good work and doing good work. So that's always been a balance.
That's your yin and yang again.
Yeah, opportunity and responsibility.
Yes.
As you mentioned, I guess the H Queen project combining the arts, so galleries and architecture must be one of the most how do you say that? One of the fulfilling projects that you have done.
Yes,
am I right?
It definitely is one of my most important project. I think what it tells me is actually we're very fortunate to have a very good client. Like all projects, you start with a good client. Also, I think that for this project, we were able to push an idea which seems like a bit crazy to reality. I mean, to do a building in the most prime land in Hong Kong and to dedicate it all to art gallery. I mean, the developer has to do a lot of risks, take a lot of risks to do a project like that. And actually, so for me, it combined all my passion into one project. I've, you know, been really passionate about art galleries. I've always wanted to do a museum. I don't have a chance to do it, but then this is a vertical kind of gallery, which is also quite revolutionary. And in a way, it's the kind of idea that came about by just, talking with the client, convincing them, working very closely with them, doing a lot of research, and finally they bit the bullet and it became a reality. That's why I think tech also has, don't just listen to what your client has to tell you, but you can always do something more with it.
Actually, there is one question from the audience asking about how to encourage clients. The question is, so they truly appreciate this participant truly appreciated the presentations. You both have mentioned green buildings and sustainability for your projects and for your designs. In Hong Kong, how will you encourage your clients to think of issues as such? Moira, would you like to go first?
Okay. Well, I think sustainability, starting with LEED, for example, in the US, is really about the environment around us and to ensure that what we are creating in our buildings is not damaging the environment. Wellness is, on the other side, is taking care of the people inside the buildings. And for us, I think that's very easy to communicate the importance of it, because particularly in China, where productivity is so important to businesses, actually, if you have a healthy environment, better air, better lighting, the right temperature, comfort, you will be able to actually work much more effectively. There have been many studies that the brain actually operates a lot better in a clean environment. And so that part is very easy to sell.
And the part of building sustainable buildings, more cradle to cradle, if possible. How do you?
Well, maybe William can answer that on the. I'll let him answer that.
Yeah.
William,
you have the mic.
Okay,
William, you go.
I'll answer that. Well, I think first of all, you choose your client to start with, and I think we have been fortunate to really work with clients that already you know when we start the project, we know that's the mindset they have, and I think that it would be a lot easier. And also we have been also advocating that with our project. So I think when a client come to us, they also know this is what to expect. I think in this part of the world, it's not that difficult to convince. I think let's say like China, they're trying, they have this national policy. They want to get to zero carbon, and by I think it's 2050 or something like that, or 2060. But the whole strategy is heading that way. So I would say that probably 60% of our client is already wanting to do that even before they hire us. The project is already going to be like LEED certified and all that. So I think that in this part of the world is really not that difficult to convince client. And I think it's just a natural thing that, we're doing project in Thailand, in Malaysia, and I think client understand. We don't really need to twist their arm to convince them.
That's great. That's helpful.
Yeah. I would.
You want to add something? Yeah.
I was just saying, I would agree with what William says. I think that particularly the zero carbon issue is becoming very, very, very important in China. And it's something that we're all really looking at very carefully, not only in the materials that we use, but in the way we actually orient a building and how we develop the effectiveness of the use of the building after it's completed, so that it continues to be healthy internally and continues to not spew terrible things out into the environment that we don't want it to do.
And I do have two last questions. One is for people like me, I have never been to Hong Kong yet. Hopefully in the near future. Right now it's quite difficult, but hopefully it will be easier soon. For architects that have never been to Hong Kong, what should architects not miss when visiting the city? Who would like to go first?
I would say Queens. Make sure you see. No, that's just a joke. I think for architects, you have to experience the density of Hong Kong and the way that it actually works. I think in a lot of dense cities, it doesn't really work and it's chaotic and all that. But Hong Kong, it's a city of multi-layers, and starting from the street, and you have the kind of elevated walkway, and then you have the mass transit, and then you have the flyover and all that. And it's the compactness of the city. It's something that you probably read about, from Le Corbusier's, like Broadacre, but in Hong Kong, it actually worked. Go to Taikoo Shing. That's the project that Moira was showing under construction. That was probably 30 years ago. Now it's a full kind of mini city, and everything works so perfectly. And this is definitely to experience.
Right.
Moira, what would you say?
I would agree with that. I think that the other thing is that if you come to Hong Kong, you really want to go to Shenzhen as well. Because here is another hugely developed metropolis that is very, very young, as starting in the late 70s, right? And my gosh, it's almost as big as Hong Kong now. And I think what is so interesting is that things are done very, very rapidly here and in China, far more rapidly than they are in Europe or in the United States. And perhaps because of that, change happens very rapidly as well. So new things are happening all the time. And I think that that's one of the most exciting things about this part of the world. That, you know, on the other hand, it's a little bit sad that a lot of the old things don't remain, that they get rebuilt or torn down and rebuilt and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, it's, you know, it's wonderful. Everyone is looking ahead. People are not looking behind. And it's a very positive and wonderfully exciting atmosphere.
Great, that sounds great.
You will be welcome when you come.
Yeah, I can't wait. I look forward to it. There's one very last question. And the question is, what advice would you give your 20 years old self if you would meet him or her right now? What will you tell him or her? Moira, would you like to start?
I would say, just keep going. That's what I've done all my life. Just keep going. Don't stop. Don't let things push you back. Don't feel that you are second rate or for any reason in the world. And just follow your passion. Follow your passion.
Nice advice.
Yeah.
William, what will you say?
I would agree, follow your passion. And I would agree, I would think to have an open mind and try everything and experience. The more experience you gather, the richer your life becomes and more stories you can tell. The only regret I have are things that I didn't try when I was a student. Now I never get to try it. Like I never went to the Rocky Horror Show. You know, well, those things I should have done.
Okay, that's a very nice to hear from you. It has been a wonderful evening for you, noon here in Germany. It has been a pleasure to host you. We were really delighted and honored to have you both participating. Your stories were delightful, wonderful. I can't wait to rewatch them. And thank you a lot for your time. Thank you also to your teams for the help coordinating everything. They were super professional. Also, of course, thanks to our partner Mosa for this event, for supporting this event. And thanks to the audience for watching and joining us. Our next event will be in 2 weeks, Brazil, quite different place to Hong Kong. We'll have 2 Brazilian architects joining us live from Sao Paulo. So thank you a lot. Thank you, William. Thank you, Moria. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.